The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fading flowers, but it was Mom's shallow breathing that gripped my heart like a vice. I stood frozen in the doorway, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, as her best friend Ellen leaned over the bed, whispering words I wasn't meant to hear. "I've always loved you, Diane," she said, her voice cracking like thin ice, and in that moment my world tilted. I'm Sarah, 27, a graphic designer with a knack for overthinking and a family I thought I knew inside out. Mom Diane was 58, a high school English teacher with a laugh that could light up a room, and a marriage to Dad that seemed as solid as the oak tree in our backyard. Dad, Robert, 60, was a quiet accountant, the kind of man who mowed the lawn every Saturday and never missed a parent-teacher conference. They'd been married for 40 years, a milestone they celebrated last summer with a backyard barbecue, their hands intertwined as they cut the cake. I'd always seen them as the perfect couple, the kind you point to and say, "That's what love looks like." But standing in that hospital room, I realized I'd been reading the wrong story. Mom was dying. Stage 4 breast cancer, diagnosed too late, had spread like wildfire, and the doctors gave her weeks. I'd spent the last month shuttling between my apartment in Chicago and their house in suburban Illinois, trying to be the daughter who had it together. But nothing prepares you for watching your mom fade, her vibrant spirit trapped in a body that was giving up. Ellen, Mom's best friend since college, was there almost every day. She was 59, a painter with wild gray curls and a voice that carried like a folk song. I'd always liked Ellen. She brought color to Mom's life, made her laugh in ways Dad never could. I just never questioned why. That day, I'd come to the hospital straight from work, my laptop bag still slung over my shoulder. I was supposed to bring Mom's favorite scarf, the blue one with tiny embroidered daisies, but I stopped short when I saw Ellen at her bedside. Their hands were clasped, Mom's frail fingers curled around Ellen's like they were anchoring her to this world. Ellen's whisper hit me like a thunderclap. "I should have told you sooner, Dee. I should have fought for us." Fought for us? My brain scrambled to make sense of it. I stepped back, half hidden by the doorframe, my pulse hammering. Mom's eyes fluttered open and she smiled. A small, sad smile that carried a lifetime of secrets. "You were always enough, Ellen," she murmured. I was the coward. I wanted to barge in, demand answers, but my feet wouldn't move. This wasn't just a confession. It was a detonation, blowing apart everything I thought I knew about my parents' marriage. Mom gay? Married to Dad for 40 years? My mind raced back to family dinners, vacations, the way Mom and Dad would bicker over the thermostat but always end up laughing. Was it all a lie? And what did Ellen mean? Fought for us. I slipped out before they saw me, my chest tight with questions I wasn't ready to ask. Back in my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, staring at the hospital's gray facade. Mom was dying, and I just overheard a truth that could rewrite our family's history. I didn't know whether to be angry, heartbroken, or relieved that she'd found love, even if it wasn't with Dad. All I knew was that I couldn't unhear it, and it was only the beginning. The next morning, I returned to the hospital with the scarf and a forced smile. Mom was awake, propped up on pillows, her face pale but her eyes still sharp. Ellen was gone, but her presence lingered like a ghost. "Sarah, honey," Mom said, her voice soft but steady, "sit with me." I did, perching on the edge of the chair, the scarf folded in my lap. I wanted to ask about Ellen, about the words I'd overheard, but the weight of her illness silenced me. Instead, I listened as she talked about mundane things, her favorite books, the garden she'd never finished planting. But then she paused, her gaze distant. "I've made mistakes, Sarah," she said. "Promise me you'll live your truth, no matter what." Her words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they were heavy with meaning I didn't yet understand. I nodded, squeezing her hand, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Ellen's confession. I thought of Dad at home, probably balancing the checkbook or watering Mom's roses. Did he know? Had he always known? The idea that their marriage might have been a facade made my stomach churn, but so did the thought of Mom hiding who she was for decades. That night I drove to Ellen's house, a small bungalow on the edge of town with a front yard full of wildflowers. I didn't call ahead, I couldn't risk chickening out. When she opened the door, her eyes widened, then softened. "Sarah," she said, stepping aside. "I figured you'd come eventually." We sat in her living room, surrounded by half-finished canvases and the faint smell of turpentine. I didn't waste time. What did you mean? Fought for us? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Ellen didn't flinch. She set down her tea, her hands trembling slightly, and began to tell me a story I wasn't prepared for. Ellen and Mom met in 1982, at a college poetry reading. Mom was 19, a literature major with dreams of teaching. Ellen was 20, an art student with a rebellious streak. They clicked instantly, spending late nights debating books and sharing secrets under the stars. We fell in love, Ellen said simply, her eyes glistening. But it was the 80s. Being out wasn't just hard, it was dangerous. Mom's parents, devout Catholics, would have disowned her. Ellen's family wasn't much better. So they hid it, sneaking moments together, pretending to be just friends. Then Mom met Dad. He was kind, steady, everything her parents wanted for her. She chose safety, Ellen said, her voice breaking. I begged her not to marry him, but she said she had to. She said she could love him in her own way. I sat there, stunned, picturing Mom at 19, torn between love and fear. I wanted to be angry. At her, at Ellen, at the world that forced her to choose, but all I felt was grief. Did Dad know? I asked. Ellen hesitated, then nodded. He found out a few years after they married. They made a deal. Stay together, raise you, keep the secret. I left Ellen's house with more questions than answers, my heart a tangled mess of love and betrayal. Mom's illness was a ticking clock, and I didn't know how to face her, knowing what I knew. But I couldn't stay away. The next day I was back at the hospital, sitting by her bed watching her sleep. Her journal lay on the table, the one I'd seen Ellen touch. I reached for it, my hands shaking, and opened it to a page marked with a daisy. Ellen, I've loved you every day, even when I couldn't say it. I'm sorry I wasn't brave. I closed the journal, tears burning my eyes. Mom stirred, her hand reaching for mine. Sarah, she whispered, don't hate me. I didn't. I couldn't. But I needed to know the rest of her story, and time was running out. The journal felt like a live wire in my hands, its pages heavy with truths Mom had buried for decades. I sat by her hospital bed, her breathing uneven, and wrestled with the urge to read more. But her words to Ellen, I'm sorry I wasn't brave, echoed in my head, and I couldn't shake the image of a young Diane, my mom, choosing a life that wasn't hers. I didn't confront her that day. I couldn't. She was too fragile, her skin almost translucent under the fluorescent lights, and I was too raw, my emotions a jumble of love, anger, and pity. Instead, I went home to my parents' house, where Dad was sitting in the living room, a glass of bourbon in his hand. He looked up, his eyes tired but kind, and I wondered how much he'd carried alone all these years. Dad, I said, sitting across from him, did you love her? It was a stupid question, but I needed to hear it. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the glass. Always did. Still do. His voice was steady, but there was a crack in it, like a fault line waiting to split open. I wanted to ask about Ellen, about the deal he'd made with Mom, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead I asked, were you happy? He took a long sip, then said, most days, yeah. We built a good life, Sarah. You were the best part. His answer didn't satisfy me. It felt like a half-truth, a band-aid over a wound I was only beginning to understand. I went to bed in my old room, surrounded by posters and yearbooks, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept seeing Mom and Ellen in my mind, their love story cut short by fear and expectation. I needed to know more, not just for me, but for Mom, who was running out of time to tell her truth. The next morning, I returned to the hospital with her journal tucked in my bag. Mom was awake, sipping water through a straw, her eyes brighter than they'd been in days. You look like you've got something to say, she said, her voice weak but teasing. I forced a smile, my heart pounding. I found your journal, I admitted, watching her face for a reaction. Her expression softened, but she didn't look surprised. I figured you might, she said. What do you want to know, Sarah? Everything. Nothing. I didn't know where to start. So I asked the question that hurt the most. Why didn't you tell me? Her eyes filled with tears and she reached for my hand. I wanted to protect you, she said. And I was ashamed. Not of who I am, but of how I handled it. She told me about her college years with Ellen, how they dreamed of a life together, maybe in San Francisco or New York, where they could be free. But the world wasn't kind to women like them in the 80s. My parents would have cut me off, she said. And I was scared of losing everything, of being alone. When I met your dad, he was safe. He loved me and I thought I could make it work. I listened, my throat tight, as she described the years that followed. She and Dad married in 1985, a small ceremony in their church. She tried to love him the way he deserved, and in many ways she did. He was her partner, her friend, the father of her child. But Ellen was always there, a shadow in her heart. They'd stayed friends, meeting for coffee, exchanging letters, pretending their love had never existed. It was easier to bury it, Mom said. But it never went away. I thought of Dad, his quiet strength, his unwavering devotion. Did he know from the start? I asked. Mom shook her head. Not at first. He found out when you were 3. I broke down one night, told him everything. I thought he'd leave, but he didn't. He said we'd figure it out for you. For me. The weight of that hit hard. Their marriage, their sacrifices had been for me, but at what cost? I wanted to be grateful, but part of me resented being the reason Mom hid who she was. I asked about Ellen, how they'd kept their connection alive. Mom's smile was bittersweet. We stole moments, she said. A phone call here, a lunch there. She was my best friend, Sarah. But she was also my what if. That night, I drove to Ellen's again, needing to hear her side. She was in her studio, painting a canvas streaked with blues and grays. She told you, didn't she? Ellen said, not looking up. I nodded, sitting on a stool, my hands clasped tight. Why didn't you fight harder for her? I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Ellen set down her brush, her eyes meeting mine. I tried, she said. But Diane was terrified. And I loved her too much to push her into a life she wasn't ready for. Ellen told me about the years after Mom's marriage, how she dated other women but never stopped loving Mom. They'd had one slip, she admitted, in 1995, a night when Dad was away and I was at a sleepover. They'd kissed, cried, promised it wouldn't happen again. It didn't, but the longing never faded. She chose you and your dad, Ellen said. But I never stopped hoping she'd choose herself one day. I left her house feeling like I was drowning in their story. Mom's love for Ellen was real, but so was her life with Dad. I couldn't reconcile the two, couldn't decide who to be angry at or if anger was even the right response. Back at the hospital the next day, Mom was weaker, her voice barely above a whisper. I sat with her, reading from her favorite book, The Great Gatsby, but my mind was on her journal. I'd read more the night before. Pages filled with love letters to Ellen, regrets, and dreams of a life they never had. Sarah, Mom said suddenly, interrupting my reading, I need you to do something for me. Her eyes were intense, like she was racing against time. Find Ellen. Tell her I'm sorry and that I love her. Always will. I nodded, tears spilling over, but inside I was terrified. What did it mean to deliver that message? And what would it do to Dad, to our family, to the life we'd built on half-truths? I spent the next day grappling with her request, avoiding the hospital, avoiding Ellen. I drove aimlessly through Chicago, past the lakefront where Mom used to take me as a kid, her laughter echoing in my memory. I wanted to scream, to demand why she'd hidden this, why she'd let it define her life in silence. But I also wanted to hold her, to tell her I understood, even if I didn't fully. When I finally returned to the hospital, Mom was asleep, her breathing shallower than ever. Dad was there, sitting by her side, his hand resting on hers. He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed, and said, She's been asking for you. I sat down, the journal burning a hole in my back, and wondered how much time we had left to unravel the truth. Dad's presence in the hospital room felt like a wall I couldn't climb. He sat there, his fingers laced with Mom's, his face etched with a grief so deep it made my own feel small. I wanted to tell him what I knew, to ask if he'd spent 40 years loving someone who couldn't fully love him back. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I pulled out Mom's journal and handed it to him. She'd want you to see this, I said, my voice barely steady. He took it, his hands trembling, and opened to the page I'd marked, the one with Mom's apology to Ellen. His eyes scanned the words, and for a moment I thought he'd break. crumble right there in that sterile room. But he just closed the journal and set it on the table. "I've known for a long time, Sarah," he said, his voice low. "We made our choices." His calm unnerved me more than anger would have. "How could you stay?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "Knowing she loved someone else?" Dad looked at Mom, her chest rising and falling in slow, labored breaths. "Because I loved her," he said simply. "And because of you. We built something real, even if it wasn't perfect." I wanted to argue, to demand how he could live with a half-truth, but the weight of his sacrifice stopped me. He'd known about Ellen, known Mom's heart was split, and still chose to stay. Was it love or cowardice? I didn't know, and maybe he didn't either. All I knew was that Mom's time was slipping away, and I needed to honor her request. I found Ellen at her studio the next day, paint smudged on her cheek, her eyes red like she'd been crying. "She's asking for you," I said, my throat tight. "She wants you to know she's sorry. And that she loves you." Ellen's face crumpled, and she sank into a chair, her hands covering her mouth. "I thought I'd have more time," she whispered. "I thought we'd get a chance to fix it." I didn't know what to say. Fix what? A love that never had a chance? A life Mom chose to protect me? I sat with her, the silence heavy, until she started talking. She told me about the summer of '84, after Mom got engaged to Dad. They'd gone on a road trip to Lake Michigan, just the two of them, stealing one last moment before Mom's wedding. "We sat on the beach," Ellen said, her voice distant. "She promised we'd always be friends." I wanted to scream, to beg her to run away with me, but I didn't. I let her go. Her regret was a mirror to Mom's, and it broke something in me. I saw them both, young and in love, trapped by a world that wouldn't let them be. I thought of Mom's journal, the pages filled with longing, and I realized she'd never stopped loving Ellen, even as she built a life with Dad. It wasn't betrayal, it was survival. I drove Ellen to the hospital that afternoon. Mom was awake, her eyes lighting up when she saw Ellen. I stepped outside, giving them space, but I lingered near the door, unable to walk away. Through the crack I heard Mom's voice, weak but clear. "I should have chosen you," she said. "I was so scared, Ellen. I'm sorry." Ellen's sob broke the silence, and I heard her say, "You gave me UD. That's enough." I walked down the hall, tears streaming down my face, and found Dad in the waiting room. He looked at me, his eyes searching, and I knew he'd heard it too. "She's saying goodbye," he said, his voice steady but hollow. I nodded, unable to speak. We sat together, two people bound by love for a woman who'd lived a divided life. The next day Mom was weaker, slipping in and out of consciousness. I sat by her bed, holding her hand, reading from her journal when she was awake. She'd written about me, about how I was her greatest joy, but also her greatest fear that I'd hate her if I knew the truth. "I don't hate you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I just wish you'd told me sooner." She squeezed my hand, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "Live your truth, Sarah," she said again, her words a mantra I couldn't escape. I promised I would, though I didn't know what that meant yet. I was still unraveling her truth, piecing together the woman she was from the fragments she'd left behind. Ellen came by later, bringing a small painting of daisies, Mom's favorite flower. She set it on the table, and Mom's eyes lingered on it, a tear slipping down her cheek. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ellen leaned down, kissing her forehead, and I looked away, giving them a moment that should have been theirs decades ago. Dad was there too, quiet as always, but I saw the way he watched Mom, his love unshaken even now. I wondered what it cost him to share her, to know her heart belonged to someone else. I wanted to ask, but the question felt too big, too cruel. Instead, I helped him adjust her pillows, our hands brushing as we cared for the woman we both loved. That night I stayed late, reading more of Mom's journal. She'd written about the day I was born, how holding me felt like redemption, like she'd done something right even if her heart was torn. She wrote about Dad, how his kindness anchored her, even when she felt adrift. And she wrote about Ellen, her what if, who never stopped haunting her. As I closed the journal, Mom stirred, her eyes meeting mine. "Sarah," she said, her voice barely audible, "forgive me." I nodded, tears falling, and held her hand until she drifted back to sleep. I didn't know if I was forgiving her for hiding, for loving Ellen, or for leaving me. Maybe all of it. All I knew was that her truth was changing mine, and I wasn't ready to lose her. Mom's breathing grew fainter each day, like a candle burning down to its last flicker. The hospital room became our world, a bubble where time slowed and every moment carried the weight of finality. I split my days between sitting by her side, talking to Dad, and trying to make sense of the journal that held her heart's secrets. One entry stuck with me, dated 1995, the year Ellen said they'd slipped. I kissed her tonight, and it felt like coming home. But I can't leave Robert, can't break Sarah's world. God, why is love so heavy? Reading it felt like eavesdropping on a life I'd never known. A life where Mom was more than my mother. She was a woman wrestling with love and duty. I started noticing the small things. The way Dad would bring Mom's favorite chamomile tea, even though she could barely sip it. The way Ellen's paintings seemed to brighten the room, even as Mom faded. I was caught between them, loving them both, hating the choices they'd all made. Dad knew about Ellen, had known for decades, yet he stayed. Ellen loved Mom, had always loved her, yet she let her go. And Mom had lived a half-life, torn between who she was and who she thought she had to be. One afternoon, I found Dad in the hospital cafeteria, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold. "How did you do it?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from him. "How did you stay with her knowing she loved Ellen?" He looked up, his eyes tired but clear. "Love isn't just feelings, Sarah," he said. "It's choices. I chose her every day, even when it hurt." His words hit me hard. I'd always seen love as passion, as fireworks, but Dad was talking about something deeper: commitment, sacrifice, the kind of love that weathers storms. I thought of Mom's journal, her guilt over choosing safety over Ellen. "Did you ever resent her?" I asked. He paused, then said, "Sometimes. But I never regretted us." I wanted to hug him, to tell him he was enough, but I didn't know if I believed it. Instead, I went back to Mom's room, where Ellen was reading to her from a poetry book. Mom's eyes were closed, but a faint smile curved her lips. I stood in the doorway watching them, and for the first time, I saw them as they might have been, two women in love, free to be themselves. Later, when Ellen left, Mom beckoned me closer. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice a whisper. "I wrote a letter for Ellen. It's in the journal. Make sure she gets it." I nodded, my heart aching. I wanted to ask why she'd waited so long, why she'd let fear win, but I couldn't add to her pain. Instead, I said, "I'll make sure." That night, I read the letter in the journal, tucked between pages of poetry. "Ellen, you were my courage even when I had none. I chose Robert, but my heart never left you. Forgive me for the years we lost. I love you always." I cried reading it, not just for Mom and Ellen, but for Dad, who'd loved her through it all. The next day, I gave the letter to Ellen. She read it in silence, tears streaming down her face, then folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "She was my everything." I wanted to ask what came next for her, for us, but the question felt too big. Instead, I hugged her, feeling the weight of Mom's love in her trembling frame. Back at the hospital, Mom was slipping faster. The doctors said it could be any day now. I sat with her, holding her hand, and told her about my life. My job, my dreams, the girlfriend I hadn't mentioned before. Her eyes lit up at that, and she squeezed my hand. "Be braver than I was," she said. "Love who you love, Sarah." I promised I would, though I wasn't sure what bravery looked like. I thought of my girlfriend, Mia, who I'd been too scared to bring home, worried about what Mom and Dad might think. Now, knowing Mom's truth, I regretted keeping Mia at a distance. I wanted Mom to meet her, to see that I was trying to live the truth she'd hidden. Dad came in later, and we sat together, the three of us, in a quiet that felt sacred. He told stories about their early years, how Mom used to sing off-key in the car, how she'd insisted on planting roses even though they always died. I laughed, cried, and held on to every word, knowing these moments were finite. Ellen stopped by that evening, bringing another painting, this one of a sunset over Lake Michigan. Mom smiled, her eyes lingering on it. "We had good days, didn't we?" she whispered to Ellen. Ellen nodded, tears falling, and took Mom's hand. I stepped out, giving them space, but I heard Ellen say, "The best days, Dee." When I came back, Mom was asleep, her breathing so faint I had to lean in to hear it. Dad was gone, probably to get coffee or just to breathe. I sat by her bed, the journal open in my lap, and read her words again, trying to understand the woman she'd been. I didn't hate her, didn't resent her. I just wished I'd known her sooner, the real her, not the version she'd shown the world. As the night deepened, I felt the truth settling into me. Mom's love for Ellen didn't erase her love for Dad, or for me. It was messy, complicated, human. And maybe that was the point. Love wasn't one thing, one choice. It was a lifetime of choices, some brave, some not, but all hers. The hospital became a second home, its beeping machines and sterile halls as familiar as my apartment. Mom was fading, her moments of clarity fewer each day, but she still had a way of looking at me that made me feel seen. I clung to those moments, knowing they were all we had left. One morning I brought Mia to the hospital. I'd called her the night before, spilling everything. Mom's secret, Ellen's love, Dad's sacrifice. Mia listened, her voice steady on the phone, and said, "I want to meet her, Sarah. If it's okay." It was more than okay, it was a lifeline. Mia was 26, a social worker with a warm smile and a knack for making people feel safe. I'd been scared to bring her into my family's mess, but now with Mom's truth laid bare, I needed her there. Mom was awake when we arrived, propped up on pillows, her daisy scarf draped over her shoulders. "This is Mia," I said, my voice shaky. Mom's eyes softened, and she reached for Mia's hand. "You're good for her," she said, her voice weak but warm. Mia smiled, squeezing Mom's hand, and I felt a weight lift. For the first time, I wasn't hiding a part of myself, and neither was Mom. We talked for an hour about nothing and everything. Mia's job, Mom's favorite books, the roses she'd never tamed. When Mom drifted off, Mia kissed my forehead and said, "She's proud of you." I believed her, but I also felt the ache of time running out. I wanted more moments like this, more chances to know Mom as she was, not as I'd imagined her. Later that day, Dad joined us, and I saw the way he looked at Mia. Cautious but kind, like he was sizing up this new piece of our family. "You make Sarah happy," he said, and it wasn't a question. Mia nodded, and I saw a flicker of relief in his eyes. I wondered if he was thinking of Mom, of the happiness she'd sacrificed. Ellen came by that evening, and the room felt crowded with unspoken history. She and Mia exchanged polite smiles, but I could see Ellen's wariness, like she was bracing for judgment. I wanted to tell her I didn't blame her, that I was starting to understand the impossible choices they'd all made. Instead, I handed her another page from Mom's journal, one I'd found that morning. "Ellen, you painted my world with colors I didn't know existed. I'll carry you with me, always." Ellen read it, her hands trembling, and looked at Mom, who was sleeping. "She was my muse," she said softly, "even when she wasn't mine." I nodded, my throat tight, and left them alone, taking Mia's hand as we stepped into the hall. "This is a lot," Mia said, her voice gentle. "But you're handling it." I wasn't so sure, but her faith in me was enough for now. The next day, Mom was too weak to talk much, but she asked for her journal. I handed it to her, and she traced the cover with her fingers, like it was a map of her life. "Write something for me," she whispered. "When I'm gone, keep my story alive." I promised I would, though I didn't know how. A blog? A book? All I knew was that her truth deserved to be told, not buried like she'd buried it for so long. Dad and I took turns staying with her, a silent agreement to share the vigil. He told me stories I'd never heard, about Mom's first teaching job, how she'd stayed up all night grading papers, how she'd cried when I took my first steps. "She loved you fiercely," he said. "Don't ever doubt that." I didn't, but I also knew her love for me had come at a cost. Ellen's visits grew shorter, like she was preparing herself for the end. One night she brought a small box tied with a ribbon. "For when she's ready," she said, handing it to me. Inside was a necklace, a simple silver chain with a daisy pendant. "She always loved daisies," Ellen said, her voice breaking. I nodded, unable to speak, and tucked the box away, knowing Mom might not wake up to see it. The doctors warned us it was close. Mom's organs were shutting down, her body too tired to fight. I sat by her bed, reading her journal aloud, hoping the sound of her own words would comfort her. One entry from 2005 broke me. Sarah's growing up so fast and I'm terrified she'll see through me. I want her to know love, real love, not the half version I've lived. I stopped reading, tears blurring the page, and looked at Mom. Her eyes were open, watching me. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Always." I leaned down, kissing her forehead, and felt her breath against my cheek, faint but still there. That night I stayed with her, Dad on one side, me on the other. Ellen came by, and we made room for her, the three of us forming a quiet circle around the woman we loved. Mom stirred, her eyes flickering between us, and she smiled. A real radiant smile that reminded me of the mom who danced with me in the kitchen. "My family," she said, her voice barely audible. We stayed like that, holding on to her until her breathing slowed, then stopped. The room was silent, the machines quiet, and I felt the world shift under me. Mom was gone, but her truth was alive in me, in Ellen, in Dad. And I knew as I held her journal that I'd carry it forward, just as she'd asked. Mom's death left a hole I couldn't measure, a void that swallowed the hospital room and followed me home. The funeral was a blur. Roses on her casket, Dad's quiet tears, Ellen standing at the back of the church, her face a mask of grief. I kept her journal in my bag, its weight a reminder of the promise I'd made to keep her story alive. Back at the house, Dad and I sorted through Mom's things, a task that felt like betraying her and honoring her all at once. We found photos, Mom and Dad on their wedding day, Mom holding me as a baby, Mom and Ellen at a college picnic, their smiles bright but guarded. "She was happy," Dad said, holding a photo of the three of us at my high school graduation. "Even with everything, she was happy." I wanted to believe him, but the journal told a different story. Mom's happiness was real, but it was layered with regret, with the ache of a love she'd never fully lived. I spent nights reading her words, trying to piece together the woman she'd been. One entry from 2010 hit hard. "Sarah's dating now, and I see her light up. I wish I'd had that courage to love without fear. I hope she does." Mia was my anchor through it all. She'd come over, cook dinner, listen as I rambled about Mom's choices, Dad's sacrifice, Ellen's pain. "You're allowed to be angry," she said one night as we sat on my couch, her hand in mine. "But you're also allowed to love her." I did love her fiercely, but I was angry too. At her, at the world that made her hide, at myself for not seeing it sooner. I went to see Ellen a week after the funeral, bringing the daisy necklace she'd left for Mom. She was in her studio, painting a canvas that looked like a storm, dark blues and grays swirling together. "She'd have loved this," I said, holding up the necklace. Ellen smiled, tears in her eyes, and took it, slipping it into her pocket. "She was my storm," she said. "Beautiful and impossible." We talked for hours about Mom, about their love, about the life they might have had. Ellen told me about the letters they'd exchanged over the years, hidden in books or slipped into coat pockets. "We were careful," she said, "but every word was a risk." I asked to see them and she hesitated, then pulled a shoebox from a shelf. Inside were dozens of letters, some yellowed with age, all in Mom's neat handwriting. I read one dated 2000. "Ellen, I saw you at the gallery today, and my heart broke all over again. You're still my home, even if I can't live there." I handed it back, my hand shaking, and Ellen tucked it away, like it was too precious to hold for long. "She wanted you to know her," Ellen said. "That's why she left the journal." I nodded, realizing Mom's gift wasn't just her story. It was the chance to rewrite mine. I'd spent years hiding parts of myself, worried about what my parents would think, what the world would say. Now, with Mom's truth in my hands, I wanted to be braver, for her and for me. Dad and I started talking more real talks, not just about Mom but about us. One night, over pizza in the living room, I asked, "Do you regret staying?" He shook his head. "I got you," he said. "And I got her for 40 years. That's more than enough." His love for her was unshakable, and I saw it for what it was, not weakness but strength, the kind that holds a family together even when it's breaking. I started writing as Mom had asked, pouring her story into a blog. I called it Her Truth, A place to share her words, her love, her regrets. I wrote about her and Ellen, about Dad's quiet heroism, about the family we'd built on love and secrets. The first post went up a month after her death, and the response was overwhelming. Comments from strangers, from friends, from people who'd lived their own hidden truths. Ellen read it too and called me, her voice thick with emotion. "You're doing what she wanted," she said. "You're setting her free." I cried then, not just for Mom, but for the freedom she'd never had, the freedom I was claiming for her now. Mia helped me keep going, reading drafts, suggesting edits, holding me when the grief was too much. One night as we walked by Lake Michigan, I stopped and kissed her, right there under the stars, unafraid of who might see. "This is for her," I said, and Mia smiled, understanding. I kept Mom's journal on my nightstand, a reminder of her courage and her fear. I read it when I needed her, when the world felt too big or my heart too small. Her words were a bridge connecting me to her, to Ellen, to Dad, to the messy, beautiful truth of our family. Months passed, but Mom's absence was a wound that didn't heal. It just changed shape. I carried her journal everywhere, its pages worn from my constant reading, her words a lifeline to the woman I was still discovering. Writing her truth became my way of keeping her alive, of honoring the love she'd hidden and the life she'd lived. Dad started coming to terms with it too, in his quiet way. We'd sit in the backyard under the oak tree and talk about Mom. Not just her secrets, but her laughter, her stubbornness, the way she'd made us a family. One day he brought out a box of her old teaching notes, filled with lesson plans and scribbled quotes from books. "She wanted to change the world," he said, his voice soft. "Maybe she did, through you." I invited Ellen over for dinner one night, a tentative step toward weaving her into our lives. She brought a painting, a vibrant mix of yellows and blues, and hung it in the living room, where Mom's roses were framed in the window. We talked about Mom, about the past, about the future. "She'd be proud of you," Ellen said, her eyes on the painting. "You're living the truth she couldn't." I nodded, thinking of Mia, of the life we were building, unafraid and unhidden. I'd introduced her to Dad, to Ellen, to the world, and every step felt like a promise to Mom. To love bravely, to live fully. Her truth grew, each post a piece of Mom's story, but also mine. A testament to the power of truth, even when it hurts. One evening I drove to Lake Michigan, the place Mom and Ellen had gone to escape the world. I sat on the beach, the journal open in my lap, and read her last entry, written days before she died. "Sarah, you're my heart. Tell our story not just for me, but for everyone who's afraid. Love is worth it, even when it's hard." I closed the journal, tears falling, and looked out at the water, its waves catching the fading light. Mom's love for Ellen, for Dad, for me, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in telling her story, I was finding my own. I thought of Dad's quiet strength, Ellen's enduring love, Mia's steady presence, and I knew I wasn't alone. I stood, the journal tucked under my arm, and whispered, "I'm doing it, Mom." The wind carried my words, and I felt her with me, not in the pages, but in the courage I'd found to live her truth. Our family wasn't what I'd thought, but it was ours, messy, complicated, and full of love. As I walked back to my car, the stars bright above, I knew I'd keep writing, keep loving, keep living for her. Mom's secret had changed everything, but it had also set us free.